This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Linode, your solution when you need a virtual server in the cloud. Use the code MacVoices2019 to take $20 off your first purchase at linode.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, yet again, another Take Control book, another Take Control author. This time, we have Mr. Jason Snell back to talk about Take Control of Photos, Apple's Photos, of course, second edition. Jason, welcome. It's good to see you.
It's great to be seen by you. Good to be here. Thank you, Chuck.
I appreciate you making the time. You're busy running a podcast empire.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably true for all of us.
Yeah, I think that is.
But it seems like, especially now, right now, for some reason, it's a little extra nuts. So, Take Control of Photos.
Yes.
Second edition. Joe tells me that this is a pretty meaty update, is the way I think he said it. And has that much changed in Photos since the transition to Catalina?
You know, I think so. When we started doing this book, it was all about the transition from iPhoto to Photos on the Mac. That was the whole idea, was just how do we deal with going from iPhoto to Photos on the Mac. And so the first version of the book was all about like making the transition, what's different, what's new, you know, what's in Photos that wasn't there. And then over time, because I think this is it's the second edition of this version, but we also did a crash course version before that. So I think this is maybe the fourth iteration of the book. What's changed is, first off, that the Photos app on iPhone and iPad has become much more useful and usable. And obviously, the sort of like transitioning out of iPhoto has become less of an issue because so many people have done it, although I suspect we'll get one last big surge of them now because iPhoto won't run at all on Catalina. It's a 32-bit app. It won't run. So maybe people will finally be sort of like forced to abandon it. And so, you know, the book has evolved over that time. So this version, the last version, I sort of added a bunch of stuff about how it works in iOS, just sort of like as little extra sidebars or ends of chapters. And this version, I decided, looking at the apps and how Apple is converging them, that what I really wanted to do was just push them together. So this book is about Photos. And if the Mac does something different than iPad or iPhone, I say so. I say, here's how you do this. On Mac, do this. On iPhone, do that. But it really is meant to be holistic, because even if you are a Mac user and you curate your photo library on your Mac, if you're using iCloud Photos, you're also shooting photos and trying to share photos. And who knows, you may even need to be editing photos on an iPhone or maybe on an iPad. And as that app has become more rich, I wanted to be able to cover it. The Mac app doesn't change as much, but the iPad and iPhone apps have progressed every year. So, you know, yeah, there's a lot in here, mostly because of that, because of changes to the OS and improvements, and because we really wanted to get the iPad and iPhone involved.
Jason, is this a book for someone who's making the transition from iPhoto? And because I know we're going to talk a lot about the editing features, but do you work through that? And I guess also Aperture too. Did that bring the Mojave?
Yeah, so that's since the beginning. I've had a section about iPhoto and Aperture. I feel like most people have probably done it now, but there is still, I think this may be the last edition that has it. There is a sort of what happens when you move and where do the things go and what's gone and what's there and what's a replacement. And I still go through that because, you know, Photos at this point is vastly more advanced than iPhoto, but Apple made some decisions to drop some features out. And then in terms of Aperture, I don't have a lot. It will convert Aperture libraries into Photos libraries. I think people who are using Aperture, if there are still people out there who are clinging to it, there are probably better options than Photos, unless you really regret being in Aperture and you want something a little simpler. But if you want that level of control over libraries, that kind of pro stuff, you know, you should probably look at Lightroom, something like that, and not the Photos app, because it is as powerful as it can be at times. It is still the app that comes with your computer or iPad or iPhone. it is meant to be a crowd pleaser, a broadly featured thing that everybody who owns an iPhone can use to see their pictures. And so, there's stuff it won't do or won't do the way you want necessarily because it's for everybody and not for a very particular use case necessarily.
Well, you said some interesting things there. Because I think we've seen many of Apple's built-in programs, so the programs that come with their Macs, get better over time, and Photos certainly has done that. But you still don't think that? I mean, obviously, it's not a level for pro photographers. But do you think it's gone just a little bit beyond being just the general crowd pleaser? That okay, I can take out red eye and I can make my photos look better, and that's it.
I don't. I think there's always going to be an edge case that Apple doesn't support. And in fact, I would actually argue that on iOS, Apple hasn't gone far enough. There are no retouch tools on iOS. You have to use a third-party app to fix a blemish or remove a person who's walking in the background or something. There are some. That's actually in the book. I actually wrote a sidebar about Pixelmator Photo, which is like a $5 app. It will open your photo right out of Photos and write it back into the photo library. So it's like an external editor for your photo library. It's got some great editing tools, and it's got including a retouching tool that Apple still hasn't done. So, I don't think Photos is ever going to be a super advanced tool where a lot of the stuff I hear from people, it's tagging and manually controlling, and like I want to add keywords, and Apple philosophically has kind of moved past that they think that most people aren't going to ever add keywords and take control of their library to that degree, right? The control you exert over it is sort of in using it and not in cataloging everything, and that their algorithms do a better job of cataloging things. And so, if you want to do more hands-on stuff like that, this app isn't gonna do it for you. But I think there's a much larger audience of people who just want to better control their photos, whether they're building libraries or they're searching for the right image or they're building photo books, or they want to make the pictures look better and remove color cast from images. And all of those things can be done within Photos. But the one thing that, especially on the iPad, that it doesn't do that frustrates me is all of its editing tools really are photo for the whole photo and not to let you retouch or apply an effect to a very particular part of it. And that seems to be a line that Apple has drawn, at least so far.
Okay. I'm glad to hear, because I am embarrassed to say that I tend to think of Photos as a Mac app, and I kind of forget, for no reason that I can really justify, that there are perfectly capable iOS versions or iPad OS and iOS versions now that, while they may not be the equivalent of the desktop, they can still do a number of very cool things.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, the reason that I pushed them together is that at this point I feel like there is not a feature added to the Mac version that is not added to the iOS version. In fact, I would say we're in a very weird state where Apple is putting more effort into the iPad and iPhone version than it is to the Mac version. But the Mac version still has features that the iPhone and iPad version doesn't have because they were added to Photos in the very beginning and have sort of just remained there. And retouching is an example of that. But so much of what they do, like they're very, very capable apps. Not just the editing, but there are new editing tools. There are like 14 different adjustment layers that you can add and change and see how they change over time in a very clever interface that they've added. But also things that you don't think about, like the face recognition stuff that has been on the Mac for a long time. It's there. It's all there on the iPad. If you are looking at any photo with people in it and you scroll up, you'll find like a bunch of information underneath that picture that most people don't ever even know is there. And it will show you all the photos, the faces that have been detected in that photo. And if you tap on one, if it knows who the person is, it'll show you all the other photos of that person. And if it doesn't know who that person is, you can right there say, this is who that is. And then that feeds its face recognition engine, and it continues to find photos of those people. And then there's a whole people album you can go to. Plus, you can search for people. So one example that I use is I can find a picture of my son on a beach very easily. I can search for his name and beach, and it'll say, here's 72 pictures of him on a beach. And that's pretty great. But you need to tell it that that's him before you can search for that. And you can do that all on an iPad. It's kind of amazing. The amount of stuff you can do on an iPad or even on an iPhone is pretty remarkable. It's not everything that the Mac version can do, but like I said, I think every new thing they add, in fact, the Mac sometimes lags a version behind for some of that stuff.
Okay, so I'm so glad you hit the machine learning thing, because that's where, somewhere between the cloud and machine learning, I think it gets a lot confusing. Is the machine learning, it's being done on my Mac,
yes,
as I understand it,
or your iPhone or your iPad? Yeah, all of the machine learning, the algorithms are in the app, but what it's doing is it's processing your photos on the device. The only exception to that is if there's something that you have. So if you said this is this person, that will sync over the cloud, but that's it. All the other kind of like facial recognition data, or is this a cow, is this a beach, whatever, those are all happening on device.
Okay, thank you. You went exactly where I wanted to, because if I sit for the next week on a beach and train my phone and say these are photos of me, these are photos of my girlfriend, these are photos of Jason, where is that information stored? Does that go to the cloud so it translates over to my desktop, or does it just remain on the phone?
Yeah, basically the way it works is any input you give. This seems to be a philosophy that Apple has in general with its machine learning stuff, is what it wants to take is user interaction as consent. So if it sees that there's a horse in a picture, there's no user interaction there. So that's a label that it will apply on the device, but it doesn't sync that. And what it's doing is it's counting on, if it sees a horse in a picture on your iPhone, then when you're on your Mac and it analyzes that picture, it's going to see the horse, right? So it doesn't do that. But what it does want is your interaction on saying, yes, this is, especially for people, this is who this is, or this is who this isn't. And that those bits of data are synced like any other kind of metadata that attaches to a photo. So if you say, this is Chuck, that it won't take the whole tree of faces that are attached to that photo of like other photos where there's a face like that it knows is Chuck, but it will take the photos that you've explicitly said, this is Chuck, and sync those. And then presumably, again, on another device, it's going to do the same facial recognition. It's going to group those faces together, and it's going to go, oh, this one's already been identified as Chuck. These must all be Chuck. But so that's how they split it, is like they'll sync your input, but everything else is at this point is done on the device. And I think the idea there is that the algorithms are just going to spit out the same thing on all the devices. That's not always true, but it's pretty close. And so they don't need to sync that stuff. They'll just run image analysis again when you get a new iPhone or when you buy a new iPad or install photos on a new Mac.
And again, you went somewhere at the very end where I wanted to go, because that's not a concern, but I guess a question that a lot of folks have is, I'm buying a new Mac. I'm going to get a brand new shiny iMac the next chance I get. But what happens to all that information that I have invested in, all that time and computing power? Does that sync via iCloud, or how does that go?
I think it depends on how you do it. If you migrate using like Migration Assistant or a Time Machine backup to a new Mac, I think you're going to get everything. It's going to have already run all of its machine learning on every photo in your library and tagged it all. And when you migrate or restore from a backup, it's going to get all of that. If you install on a fresh OS install and you just open, you don't even download it, it's included. You just open Photos and log into iCloud and turn on iCloud Photos. It will very slowly over time sync all your photos either every single thing if you've got that box checked, or thumbnails and some like basic data of everything, and it will begin to do some data analysis on the fly, and it will eventually reach that same point by rebuilding and looking at what hints you've given it and by running its algorithms. So it really is just sort of like depends on how you do it. But what they don't want is this is sort of Apple's philosophy on this. Is like Apple isn't looking at your photos in the cloud. Like when you put photos in the cloud, you can log in, you can choose to share them, you can log into them. But what Apple's not doing is running algorithms on its servers in the cloud that are looking at your photos and are marking what they are, which is, I believe that's how Google Photos works, for example. And Apple wants to not do that. And so Apple will be the sync repository, but it's not looking at those photos. It's just syncing those photos between devices. And then the devices look at the photos and apply algorithms to them.
And it's not syncing the photos, it's syncing thumbnails, and if I understand it correctly.
So it depends. So, your full resolution photos and videos are stored in iCloud, which is why one of the big things about if you're going to go all in on iCloud photos as a feature, you're going to need to buy enough storage, pay Apple a monthly fee for enough storage to sync those photos in the cloud. But the way it works is there's a setting in the preferences on the Mac, and it's in the settings, photos and camera settings on iPad and iPhone. Writing a book like this, you learn to talk like that. Just let me tell you, it's in a different place, but I'm going to tell you both of them. And basically your choice is sync everything to this device, or essentially don't. Like just automatically load what needs to be loaded. And in most cases, that's the choice you should make, because unless you have a very small photo library or a very, 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 very high capacity iPhone or iPad, your photo library is not going to fit on your iPhone or iPad. It may not fit on your Mac. If you've got an SSD, it may not fit there too. It doesn't fit on my Mac. I highly recommend that if you've got a Mac, you have a hard drive somewhere that is big enough to store your entire library and that you download it, because a cloud resource is not a backup. I feel like I want a copy of my entire library on a hard drive in my house. I don't want it to just be in Apple's cloud. What if something happens? I don't trust Apple's cloud to be the only place that stuff lives. But that's a setting. And if you don't use that setting, then it downloads the thumbnails and some of the data, and it will download some data and process and then delete data. It caches data. But the idea there is, you probably have seen it. If you scroll back to an old picture and you tap on it or double click on it, it comes up and it's kind of low resolution, and there's depending on what device you're using, there's a little circle in the corner that kind of ticks, and then it resolves into full resolution. And what's happening is it's showing you a thumbnail while in the background it downloads the full resolution version from the cloud, and then that will stay on your device for a while until it needs to free up some space for something else, and it'll get deleted, but it's fine because it's still on the cloud. If it needs it again, it will download it again. So it's the cloud is your cache if you don't have enough disk space, basically locally.
Today's Mac Voices is supported by Linode. You can build it on Linode. What can you build on Linode? Pretty much anything you want from a server perspective. With fast native SSD storage, industry-leading processors, and a 1.4 gigabit network, your server is going to be really fast. So your resulting web presence is going to be really fast. With Linode's quick install options, you can get all kinds of servers up and running with just a click or two. WordPress, Minecraft, OpenVPN, Arc, WireGuard, Drupal, and more are all at your command. So creating is easy. Even if you have dozens of Linodes installed, their easy-to-use dashboard makes managing simple. So management is easy. Linode has data centers all over the world, from Newark to London, Singapore to Toronto. Linode has you covered. So managing geography-related matters is easy. In those rare instances that a problem does arise, Linode has 24/7 customer support. So support is easy. You can configure backups when you need them, with 3 times replication. So keeping the data on your server safe is easy. Increasing and decreasing storage can be done with a click. So adjusting to your growing or shrinking needs is easy. In other words, using Linode for your virtual cloud server is easy. That's why you need to visit linode.com/MacVoices right now to find out what it can do for you and to get a $20 discount on your first purchase. That's Linode, linode.com/MacVoices. If you've been wanting to check out a virtual server, now's your big chance. Go to linode.com/MacVoices and get started today. Thanks to Linode for their support of MacVoices. Jason, how large can one expect to have as their photo library, and have it be? I'm not going to say manageable, but have it perform well on your Mac, on your iPhone, on your iPad.
Oh, I think you can have it be extremely large and have it perform well. That's one of the things that Apple has done a very good job doing. I'm trying to see here. My photos library is 87,000 photos and 2,200 videos, and it works fine. I am paying for 2 terabytes of iCloud. I think I'm only using 1, but I am paying the full price for the largest amount of iCloud you can buy because that's a very large library and I'm storing it all in the cloud, but it works fine. And the best part is those 87,000 photos have all been scanned by the machine learning algorithm, which means they're searchable, which allows me to type. Again, my favorite example is I have one picture of my dog, not my current dog, my previous dog, in the snow. We took her on a trip up into the mountains. And if I type dog snow into the search box, it gets that picture. It says, this is the picture I have that is of a dog and of snow. And it totally is, that's what it is. And that's the beauty of it, is out of those 80,000+ photos, it found exactly the one I wanted without me having to say, like, where were we, or when did we go there, or which dog was that? Like, I don't have to do any of that. All I have to do is say, show me the dog in the snow, and it totally does it.
I didn't mean for us to get quite this deep into the machine learning and the cloud stuff, but I think it's important, and I think that's a lot of confusion that goes on out there.
And it's actually important because this goes beyond. In the new versions in Catalina and in iOS and iPadOS 13, Apple is not stepping back from this. It's stepping into all of this stuff. The idea that the software knows things about your photos, because the whole premise of this app now and the changes that they made is that you take too many photos to keep in your brain. You're never going to go find them. You're never going to see them again. And the whole idea is for you to look at these photos and have memories of past things that have happened. So the new primary photo browsing interface for this app are these 3 settings: years, months, and days. There's also an all photos view that is essentially the old primary view of all your photos. But years, months, days is all driven by machine learning. So in days, it's looking for duplicates and dropping those out. It's a curated list. Years, months, and days aren't showing you your whole library. They're showing you things that it has algorithmically decided are relevant because there are people in them, because you took a lot of pictures in this event, you were traveling, or whatever it is, and then it doesn't show you all of them. It compares them and goes, well, I've got 5 of these. I only need to show you 1. And this is the one I think is the best. Literally, that's the kind of stuff it's doing. So in the days view, you're getting a curated sort of event-based view of things that have happened over the course of a month. It's not every day. It'll coalesce things together. So if you went on a trip for 2 days or 3 days, it'll kind of put those together. And then in weeks view, in months view, it's zoomed out even further, where you're getting these little tiles of things that happened in that month. And then in the years view, it actually does something completely different, which is it picks a photo that happened on basically the anniversary of which is roughly where the current time is. So if you look at the years view at Halloween, you will see past Halloweens. And if you look at Easter, you will see past Easters. And if you look in June, you will see graduations. It's very clever. And the whole idea with all of this is, how can we simplify this and use our machine learning to bring the best photos up to the top? Because you're never going to, you're going to drown in 80,000 photos. But can the algorithm show you a smaller group. And, this is something that they introduced a couple years ago with this concept of memories, where it's algorithmically generating like a trip to the beach, having fun with pets, and all these other things to pull things out of your library that you might like to see. And with this version, they've gone in on the whole interface. Like the whole interface by default is driven by this curated, here are the photos we think are best. And you have to go to all photos if you want to see everything, because by default, it's not even going to bother showing you. They're there. I don't think it's sinister or anything. I think it's actually good because, if you've ever taken, 80 photos at the beach or 10 photos of the exact same moment, you just you don't need to see all 10. And so it will kind of not show you all 10. They're there if you want, but it doesn't show you. So Apple is just like every decision Apple is making here is being driven by having the machine learning stuff analyzing every photo on your device.
And it's probably it's never going to get worse. It's always going to get better as we move forward and get
For sure.
better algorithms and more power.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to keep growing. This is a direction Apple has been going, and honestly, all of Apple's competition, like Google, has been going in this direction for a few years now. The idea that, I was somebody who used to tag my photos and who was in each one of them and all of that, and I gave up because there were just too many photos, and the technology has advanced to the point where you just don't. All you need to do is take your pictures, and the computer figures out, or the phone figures out who's in them. And and where they were taken and when. We already know that from date stamping and from GPS. And now it will even do things like my daughter had some photos that she took at a rock concert she went to, and it doesn't just show it doesn't say oh, January 18th, Oakland. It says January 18th and the name of the artist who performed at the concert, because Photos knows that that's a concert venue, has a calendar of concert events, knows whose concert that was, and then it lists that and says, oh yeah, this is this concert. So it's only going to be more of that as we go forward.
Wow, that's impressive. I didn't know it would do that. That's impressive.
Yeah. As a sports fan, I'm a little grumpy because it has not yet detected sporting events in order to say this is what sporting event you were at. It just says this stadium, but I'm sure that's all coming, where it's going to know not just that you were there at a place, but that there was an event that happened there, and we can mark that and we can say. So then I could say, instead of saying show me all the photos I took at California Memorial Stadium, I could say show me all the photos that I took of Cal versus USC. And it should be able to do that. It doesn't do it yet, but it should be able to do that at some point, because that's where they're going with this stuff, is adding richness to your photos without you having to do anything.
And the beauty of something like that too is that some of that is just correlating the metadata that you have with data
right.
that we just have to open the doors to those databases and
exactly.
connect them. And, so you might be able to do that search even if you took that photo of, what did you say, Cal versus USC 6 years ago.
Exactly, because as long as there's location data and there's time data, it should be able to know oh, well, if you were at that stadium on this day, at this time even, you were at the football game. So I'm going to put that in, this baseball game or whatever. And that's all. Right? It's not impossible. It's just that somebody has to do that. We are in an era now where all of those data sources are being mined for this kind of information, so that you don't have to worry about it. If you think, as a kid, I grew up on Star Trek, and there's very much, I look back at those old Star Trek episodes now and am impressed by what they're doing in some of those scenes where they're querying the computer, where they're using essentially Siri. They're using voice commands to do very robust database searches. And, this is where we are now. This is not the 23rd century, but this is where we are now, where they would be like, computer, can you cross-reference all the incidences of this? And it says working, which it doesn't need to do anymore. It just does it. It just gives them to you. And it's like, show me all of the instances where this person and this person appeared together in my photo library. And it's like, here they are. There are 18 of them. That's the kind of stuff we can do. Or show me all the football games, or show me all the rock concerts, or just type in the name of the artist you saw, and boom, there it is. That's when you saw him.
Yeah. Wow. So let's shift to the other part that you said is probably not necessarily so great on the iPad and iPhone, but the editing tools. I believe you said we have new editing tools.
Yeah, so the editing tools on the Mac are not any different. They really didn't do anything on the Mac side. On the iPad and iPhone side, they really dramatically changed the tools. So there's a 3-tabbed interface. Basically, sometimes if you've got like a live photo or it's a video, you'll have an additional icon. But basically, there's crop and there's adjustments and there's filters. And filters are unchanged. Filters are like Instagram style. There are 9 of them. It's like make it warmer, make it colder, make it black and white, stuff like that. It's super simple. Adjustments is where most of the action is happening. That's where the magic wand is that like will auto adjust your image. But what they've done is they've created this interface where there are these little icons, and they're in a strip. It depends on the iPad, they're on the side. On the iPhone, they're on the bottom. But the idea is they're all together in a strip like a wheel. And so as you swipe on the group of the icons, they all kind of like come up and then scroll off on the top and then come up from the bottom. And there are 14 of them. And each of them is an icon with a circle around them. This is whether people are going to figure out. It takes a little moment to conceptualize what's going on here, but the little circle around them is how much that effect is applied to the image. So when you've got let's say brightness turned on, the brightness control is sitting there. Whatever one is in the center, dead center, and selected, off to the right is a little wheel that you spin by flicking your finger, basically. And with something like brightness, you can go all the way up to plus 100 or all the way down to minus 100, and it'll do exactly what you would think, which is it makes the image much brighter or much darker. And contrast, it'll add or remove contrast. And there are 14, like I said. It's like a lot of these different controls. But one thing that you may not notice the first time you use it is that as you're adding 100 brightness or 50 brightness or wherever you dial it in, that there's this little circle around the icon, and the circle grows. It's almost like it's like a clock. It moves clockwise and fills up as you apply more effect to it. And so it's actually showing you at a glance how much brightness is applied to your image. And all the other circles are also showing that. So at a glance, after you tap the magic wand, you can actually look at all the other icons and see what the magic wand did. Because what the magic wand does isn't in a black box. What the magic wand does is automatically adjust all of those other controls to do what it thinks is best. And then you can see them all. And then also, if you don't like something and you're like, I didn't mean to adjust the brightness, I don't like this. If you just tap on the circle, it toggles it off, and then the brightness adjustment goes away. So it's a pretty sophisticated tool with a lot of information there if you pay attention. And so it's pretty powerful. There are things that it does differently than the Mac. There's some things that are not quite, the black and white tools don't exist on iOS. You need to apply a black and white filter, and then you can adjust within there. And the Mac has explicit black and white tools. They do color a little bit differently, but the truth is you can basically do everything you do on the Mac with adjustments on the iPad and the iPhone with adjustments now. And that's not just for photos. You can actually do that for video too, which is kind of mind-blowing that they will apply that effect to every single frame of video, of 4K video you shot on an iPhone. Totally will do that, which is pretty amazing. So that's the adjustment layer. And then the crop tool is also more advanced now, where it's doing automatic cropping. So if it sees that your photo is, this is not a new feature, but if it sees your photo is not level, it will automatically crop it or like rotate it so that it is level. And if it sees that your photo is skewed, like you're standing in front of a tall building and you lean back and you shoot the shot of the building, it will actually automatically, because the crop tool also has de-skewing tools, it will de-skew the shot of the building so the building looks straight instead of looking all angly because you were at a low angle looking up at it. And there are some other weird things that it will do especially on the iPhone with the new iPhone 11. If you shoot a picture or a video where there's somebody kind of on the edge of the frame, it will use the features of the iPhone 11 to um, uncrop them, because on the iPhone 11 there are certain circumstances where it will take a video or a picture with the wider camera at the same time that you're taking it with the normal camera. And if it detects that there's something on the edge that you might have regretted missing, it will keep it around for a while. And you can use the crop tool to kind of open it up and get that person in frame. It's there's a lot going on in the editing tools, and the crop tools especially. Like, it doesn't always make the right decision. You can always revert it or turn it off. But if you're somebody who struggles with, like, you have a really nice photo and you're like, oh, I didn't hold the camera straight, did I? Like this, you click the crop thing, and before you even touch a tool, it's like, oh, let me straighten that for you, and it just straightens it. So there's a lot. There's a lot. Like I said, not everything. If you want more, there are some great apps. My favorite is Pixelmator Photo, that will let you open those photos in a third-party app and make more edits and save them back into the photo library, which is super convenient. They don't make duplicates. It goes right over the original. You can always revert back to the unedited version, even if you edited it in a third-party app. So, there's a lot. If you haven't explored the pleasure of editing photos on an iPad, I recommend it. It's actually a great experience now.
You're telling me some things that I knew some of those were there, but I didn't know a lot of them were there. And I I think I've resisted editing photos on my iPad or my iPhone as much. I mean, I've played with it, and it's a positive experience, but I'm never quite sure that they're going to look as good as they do, or they're going to look the same, I should say, as when I bring them over to the Mac and do them there. And so maybe that's just something I have to get over.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same photos and it's the same pixels and it's the same effects. I think, um, I think you could. I think you can do it on the iPad. The thing that really got me was seeing Pixelmator Photo, because as somebody who's a Photoshop person from way back, and even using the retouching tool in Photos for Mac, um, there is something about opening, like, I'm on vacation. I took a picture of my family at the beach, and there's this guy walking on the beach behind them. I'm like, I don't want that guy in this picture. And in Pixelmator Photo, not only does it have all these its own machine learning stuff to do, like it's got a magic wand that's like the machine learning magic wand, and they claim that it's a much better effect, and it is pretty good. But their retouching tool is so good in that you tap the retouching tool and you take your finger and you scribble with your finger over the guy on the beach in the background, and you let go and he's gone, and it's just beach. It's so good. And then the best part being, you used to be able to do this with some apps on the iPad, but the problem was Apple didn't make it possible for that to be saved back to your photo library. So you had to import it to the photo library, and you got an extra photo. It was a duplicate, but slightly edited in the wrong time often. So it would sort in the wrong place, lose its metadata. And that's not the case anymore. Apps like Pixelmator Photo, when you're done in Pixelmator Photo, you say done, and it says, do you want me to save this back to the library where I got it? And you say yes. That's it. And it's just, boop, it's back in your iCloud photo library. We'll sync everywhere else. And it's great. So I really endorse the iPad photo editing experience. It's pretty great. It really is. And it keeps getting better, even though you do have to use a third-party app, because Photos, I don't know why Apple hasn't added that feature to Photos yet, but they haven't.
And to sort of bring this conversation full circle, the fact that I take them on my phone, they're still going to show up on my iPad and I can edit them there. So I don't have to make that choice.
And editing on the iPhone is great. The iPhone is so powerful that I think, yes, it's a small window into which to look. Right, it's a very small device, and so editing a photo on an iPhone, you're like, oh, well, I can barely see it, or you zoom in and you got to pan around and all that. I get it, but having these features on an iPhone, which means you can take a picture or take a bunch of pictures and maybe back at the hotel, or you're on vacation or at lunch or something, and you find a great one and you can crop it and you can adjust it, you can put a filter on it, you can do whatever you need to do, and then share that, post it to Instagram, put it on Facebook, whatever you want to do. Like, having powerful editing features on an iPhone is great if you are out and about taking pictures, but you don't want, they need a little bit of adjustment. You don't want to just send them as is. And so it's great to have those features there. And then on the iPad with a nice big screen and the touch controls, if you're not bringing a Mac with you with your whole photo library on it, that can be a nice way, sort of at the end of the day, to put together sort of like, these are the pictures from today, and share those with friends, or just to look them over. So I think it's good that Apple is really building this ecosystem of devices that can edit photos, instead of it being like, no, take your pictures over here and edit them over there. You can do it all anywhere now.
Jason, it sounds like there's a lot here. Joe's right. This is a meaty update, and it's one that you need someone like you who has spent as much time as you have to walk you through everything and make sure you are taking advantage of all these capabilities.
Yeah,
it's tempting to just look at photos and say, it's photos, and I hit this button and they look nice. But man, there's a lot of stuff here that I was not even aware of.
Yeah, there's a lot. Apple doesn't always communicate it. They go in fits and starts with their Photos updates, but there's a lot of good stuff here, and you gotta kind of walk through it. Joe and I have talked. I think next year we may actually add some videos and stuff to the mix too.
So, Jason, how much is this edition of Take Control of Your Photos? Of Take Control of Photos.
Photos, right? It's $15 if you're buying it for the first time. I think there's a $5 upgrade from previous editions. There's a $20 bundle with Jeff Carlson's book, which is about digital photography in general. Jeff is a spectacularly great photographer, and that's a nice combination if you want to think about photography and digital photos more holistically. My book is about the Photos app. That's what it's about. So that's a good bundle. And then we are charging for an update for this because it's a pretty meaty update. But if you bought it before, it's a pretty small little fee to get the new version. And this is how I spend my summers. Sometimes is doing this, taking this journey where I've got, I'm looking at betas and they're what's new and all of that. And I do it because not everybody else is going to do that and spend the time with it. I'm clicking on every single icon and going in every menu and trying to figure out the differences. Like, I didn't keep a running list, but I thought at the end, I should have kept a running list of what's not the same between Mac and iOS, because there's some weird, and I think nobody would notice except me. I think I may be the only person not on the Photos team to have noticed, why is this icon different here? And why is this worded slightly differently? And all of these things. But I noticed because I spent my whole summer writing these and rewriting these chapters about it. So that's sort of the perfect distillation of why we do what we do, is nobody wants to do that. So I do it. And then I report the answers to you in this book. And then you don't have to worry about it all summer like I did.
TakeControlBooks.com is where you can go to get Jason's book and Jeff's book and get the two in a bundle, so you save even more money. And we just had Jeff on to talk about his book, and these two together, I mean, it's kind of a dynamic duo that you really need to go and put these both together to outline your photo strategy and to get the most out of what Apple's giving you in Photos for all the devices.
Yeah, you can do a lot. You'd be surprised. I think that's the bottom line, is you might be surprised at how much you can do in Photos, including on the iPad and the iPhone. You really can do a lot.
You've inspired me, Jason.
Excellent.
There goes my
iPad
winner.
photo editing is in your future now.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, thanks so much for the time. We really appreciate, first of all, you losing all your summer to all this and then coming back and reporting it, and to come and tell us about it this time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Chuck. It's always a pleasure.
We'll do it again. Next time, maybe with videos.
Ooh.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. I can't stress enough, your photos are so important, and you really should be getting the most out of them. And some of the things Jason just told us will help you get even more out of them, things I didn't know that now I'm anxious to go and play with. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.